today. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Marshall Smith. He is with the AUVM Museum, which is abbreviation for, let's see if I can get this right.
A lot.
That is on here somewhere.
It's on the back of the shirt.
Aircraft Unmanned
Vehicle.
Vehicle Museum, am I right?
Aviation Unmanned Vehicle
Ours
Museum.
is just as long.
Yeah.
They started the museum in 2017. Marshall's grandfather started it. And he's going to be telling us all about drones and the museum and kind of how drones have changed over the years. And this month's program sponsor is John Yasnaga, so thanks to him as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Marshall.
Thank you. Okay, well thanks for coming out, guys. We are the AUVM Museum, Aviation Unmanned Vehicle Museum. And we brought a couple engines out. We wanted to bring some drones, but they're just a little bit difficult to load up and get here. But this is your early Rider engine from the OQ-2A, early to mid 1930s, and it had a bi-directional prop. There's two props on there, and this was 6 horsepower.
6 horsepower.
6 horsepower.
It is.
But you're talking about just a 10-foot plane, and it had 5 commands: up, down, left, right, and parachute deploy. They didn't have a landing gear, land it like a traditional plane. It would just deploy the parachute either on command or when it ran out of fuel, land down, and they'd go pick it up and get it ready for the next one. And then we go
So
up here.
what was the payload? The camera?
No camera, just a target drone to be shot
Oh,
at.
target.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Yep, they would launch these in World War II. They launch them right off the ship for target gunnery practice.
I see.
Or on land as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's about we have the launch rail. It's about 40 feet long. If you've seen drones today, you've seen them. They launch them off of those rails the same way they've been doing it since the 30s.
Oh.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so as we go on, the engines get a little bit bigger and better. I think this one's 8 horsepower, and it goes to a single prop. And then we go up here. This one's a little bit bigger. The cylinders are bigger. And mind you, these are all Hemis. These are hemispherical cylinder heads and hemispherical pistons. So that's kind of cool. You can tell everyone's got a Hemi in it.
383?
Yeah. What's the horsepower on that one?
That one is 35, that's on the NASCO.
30. Then we go up to 35 horsepower. And then we go up to this one. This one's a cutaway, so you can really see the ins and outs of it. But this one was in 2 versions, a 72 horsepower and a 90 horsepower. And the 90 horsepower was 90 pounds and 90 horsepower.
60 pounds.
60 pounds.
Okay, when you say cutaway, that end that you touch and didn't get cutaway, right?
Nope,
But
this
the
one
other
here.
end did.
Yep, so you can
Okay.
see the innards of that one really good.
So there's only those 2 rounds on the front.
How big a plane is that?
It's about 16 to 18 feet long, about a 15-foot wingspan, and the engine that drone was on was the Northrop Grumman KD-2R5, and it was your most produced drone, U.S. drone. Over 73,000 of them were made.
What's the speed on that? What normal or
Gosh, what is that speed?
150.
150. I think they got it up to about almost 200 at the very end.
that's with the 90 horse motor and
Yes, sir.
depending on the prop and everything?
Yes, got a prop, wooden prop. And there towards the end, they were really experimenting with a lot of things. We have one version of the drone. It had smoke flares on it, right underneath the wings on each side. And we just discovered that. You know, this is all, let me back up a little bit. This is all my grandfather's collection. He's right here with this drone in Vietnam.
Yeah,
And,
they use that in the early drone,
yeah, that's year 1971, 1972. And he was actually the first drone officer in the Air Force.
right?
And he was involved and ran the drone programs during Vietnam. There were several different programs they were running. Lightning Bug is the big one, where that drone right here would fly. They had different variations, but this one relayed live color video back to the C-130 mothership in the 70s.
Yeah, they started that using those in what, 71 or 70 years?
Well, it started out as a target drone in 1952.
Right.
And when Francis Gary Powers was shot down over Russia, that propelled the need for the unmanned reconnaissance program.
Right.
Grandpa was actually pulled into JFK's office after that incident to discuss current unmanned reconnaissance abilities. And JFK was pretty disgusted we weren't further along with it. And it was all black funded at that time by the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, and it was to be referred to as Program D. And they didn't even want you saying that. It was all very top secret stuff back then. A lot of the drone program stuff from Vietnam just got declassified in the 2010s, 2015. But with that, dude, I want to bring my dad up here because he knows way more about Vietnam reconnaissance drone stuff.
My name is Doug Smith. I'm the son of Harold Smith, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Smith. This is a picture of him at Benoit Air Base, which is where the drone program was operated out of. And Benoit Air Base was east of Saigon, near the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Yeah.
And that airplane there is the 147A. And the 147A was designed to do multiple things. It was designed to do decoy work, reconnaissance work, and it was also later in the war designed to fire Maverick missiles on target. And just to give you an example of some of the reconnaissance work, I'll let you pass this around. During the war, Hanoi and Haiphong were the most heavily defended cities during the war. And if you had a mission, fighter mission over to Hanoi or Haiphong, you had a 50% chance of coming back because of the Russian SA-2 missile. The Russian SA-2 missile shot down 3 U-2s, one Gary Powers over Russia, a guy named Williams over Cuba, and another U-2 was shot down over China. We could not fly U-2s over Vietnam because the SA-2 could shoot it down. This picture was taken over one of those cities, and if you look closely, you'll see the gun emplacements on this, in this picture. It shows you how numerous and how well defended Hanoi and Haiphong were during the Vietnam War. Now,
Boy, they're not hard to pick out, are they?
no, they're not.
But we never did hit Hanoi with any of our artillery or anything. We weren't allowed to.
Well,
I sat in briefings with General Burdett and Abrams, and we weren't allowed to.
Wow.
We could have eliminated Vietnam War in 60 days.
Wow.
We were bombing all around Hanoi and everywhere else.
yeah.
We never got into the city like they're doing in Ukraine.
Wow.
So the need for the 147A aircraft arose because of the SA-2's ability to shoot our fighters down, and we couldn't use the SR-71 because it's cloudy 85% of the time over in Vietnam. So its ability to take reconnaissance pictures was not very well done, and it couldn't perform that mission. So the Air Force went to Ryan Aeronautical and asked them to develop an aircraft that could fly at 600 feet, at 700 feet at 600 miles an hour. Back then, the SA-2s could not shoot down a low-altitude, high-speed aircraft. And that's where the impetus for the development of that aircraft came from. And so, like I said, if you had a fighter mission over Hanoi or Haiphong, you had a very low chance of coming back. And the development of this aircraft as a decoy saved our pilots' lives, because they would fly this aircraft ahead of the bombing missions, and they would fire the SA-2 missile at this aircraft, give away the launch sites, and our fighter bombers would record that launch site and come in and destroy that missile site. So this aircraft saved our pilots' lives. Not only was it a decoy and recon, but the Ryan Aeronautical developed radar jamming equipment that flew on this aircraft, and it would fly this aircraft ahead of bombing missions. See, when the SA-2 missile was fired at an aircraft, say it's a fighter or even a drone, it had 4 proximity radars. It didn't have to hit the aircraft, it just had to get within a certain distance, and those radars would ignite the missile and destroy our aircraft. So during the war, Ryan Aeronautical developed radar jamming equipment that they would fly ahead of our bombing missions that would jam the SA-2 missiles, and that it would fly right on past our fighters and allow us to keep going to perform our missions. And so the necessity of this aircraft was because of the SA-2 missile. If you want to talk about the nemesis of the Vietnam War for our aircraft, it was the SA-2 missile, and the Ryan Firebee drone was the nemesis of the SA-2 missile. So we have one of these aircraft on display at the AUVM Museum, if y'all want to come look at it, as well as many other unmanned aircraft. Our collection starts from the early 30s and goes all the way through the mid-80s. We just received into our collection a 1986 Banshee 3 target drone, and it's a complete composite aircraft that was used for target practice and is still in production today.
Could I ask a question about this?
Yeah.
How was it controlled? Was it
Well,
remotely
it was-
controlled, or?
That's a good question. Let me go over a typical mission for that aircraft. You can see right here it's mounted on a pylon. This pylon is about 10 feet long and on a C-130. And once that aircraft took off out of Benoit Air Base, it would fly near the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It would be wing launched, fly up the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and then out into the Bay of Tonkin. Once it got out into the Bay of Tonkin and completed its mission, it would be a parachute would be deployed, and that aircraft was mid-air retrieved or mid-air recovered by a helicopter. The helicopter would recover that aircraft mid-air, carry it back to Da Nang Air Base, where it would be gently let down on a cushion, and then crews would grab this aircraft, put it back on the pylon at Da Nang Air Base, and then fly it back to Benoit Air Base. Once it got back to Benoit, they would rearm it, refuel it, and get it ready for its next mission. So it would be pre-programmed, in answer to your question, it would be pre-programmed to fly a certain path and then deviate off that path at the end of its mission out into the Bay of Tonkin, where it could be easily recovered. Now, sometimes it didn't complete the mission, sometimes there was an equipment failure, sometimes it got shot down. But the ultimate proof that the Firebee worked was because it saved lives, and near the end of the war, the Vietnam War, this aircraft would be flown ahead of bombing missions and jam the radar of the SA-2 and make the SA-2 virtually ineffective to our bombing missions. Now, did that help us win the war? We certainly think it did. But if you look at unmanned aircraft today, compared to those days, everybody knows what the Predator is, right? I mean, y'all have seen the Predator and the Reaper, and those aircraft have now become obsolete. Now what we're looking at is fighter bombers that are fully autonomous that will be entering the service for the U.S. Air Force. So unmanned aircraft have gone from piston 6 horsepower reciprocating engines all the way to fully autonomous jet-powered fighter aircraft. And this aircraft eventually, one of the things that was proven during the war in 1971, and Dad was a part of this program, was they fitted Maverick missile mounts on the wings of the Firebee and proved that the Firebee could fire a Maverick missile and be on target in 1971. So later on, after the Air Force proved, the drone program proved that this was a viable option for the military, they went to Washington to try and sell this development of the aircraft, and at that time the political environment was not conducive to unmanned aircraft firing Maverick missiles. And the Congress elected not to fund further development of unmanned jet aircraft.
The Maverick, air-to-air or air-to-ground?
Air to ground.
Yep, the AGM-65. And that was the thing that right after that they developed the BGM-34C, the multi-mission RPD is what they called it. It could do reconnaissance, it could fire weapons, it could be the decoy. It was your Predator. But
Yep.
the political stuff, they couldn't get it done.
Yeah. So, but now you've got the Predator, which has been decommissioned. You've got the Reaper, which followed the Predator, which is the Reaper still active?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Reaper's still active. But there are numerous, and when I say numerous, I mean there's small military drones this big and then as big as jets. I mean, the unmanned aircraft world is a burgeoning part of the military that is going to help our country defend itself. So that pretty much is a...
You said that first machine was developed in the 30s. Do you know which part of the 30s?
Yeah.
Early 30s or late 30s?
This engine was developed. Here's how this engine was developed. Now, Reginald Denny, maybe some of you know of Reginald Denny. He was similar with Audie Murphy in that he was an actor in Hollywood. Well, he was an actor and starred in over 200 films, but his real passion was unmanned model aircraft. And so he was out flying his Denny Jr., and the Army caught wind of that, and they asked him to build a target drone. And the first target drone was built and tested in 1936. And it was powered with this engine. This engine was built by Walter Ryder and the Ryder Engine Manufacturing Plant in Inglewood, California. Now, the way Reginald Denny came up with the engine, he put in the paper, in the Los Angeles newspaper, an engine building contest. And he was looking for a lightweight engine to power his OQ-2A target drone. Walter Ryder won the engine building contest with this engine right here. The 6 horsepower counter-rotating propeller engine, which is this one here. And then eventually it turned into the 8 horsepower engine, and then the 35 horsepower engine, and then the 72 horsepower, and then the 90. But
Were those all built by the same company?
they were all built by the same company, Ryder, the Ryder engine plant. Ryder couldn't keep up with the demand need, and then it was farmed out. More of the engines were farmed out to Herkimer and Monasco, and what's the other one?
I don't know. Oh, can I add one more touch on the Ryder
Yeah.
engine?
Yeah.
So everyone knows Marilyn Monroe. Well, that's when she was Norma Jean. She was working on the assembly line at the Ryder Company.
You mean she might have touched that one?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, she did touch
I
that.
think she did. I think she did.
Just said,
So we don't know for sure how it played out, but we have the picture of her.
wow.
She's holding the prop. I don't know if it was planned or if it was, hey, you're pretty cute, jump in and hold the prop. But she
Yeah.
turned into Marilyn Monroe shortly after that.
Yeah, so in 1952, Northrop Grumman bought Radioplane. Radioplane was the company original Denny formed to build the target drones. And Northrop took over the Radioplane and took over the unmanned aircraft, and they're still at it today. So I want to thank you guys for letting us come and share a little bit of information with you about it, and we invite all of you, including the Audie Murphy Museum, to come over and visit us and look at our museum. I think you'll find it very interesting. Do you have any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Woo. This wasn't told to us.
Okay, so this is the Firebee target drone, BQM-34 Firebee. And believe it or not, this has been in service over 50 years. And it's still in service today at Point Mugu Naval Air Station. And so this is just, if you look at it, you can see it says BQM-34 Firebee, excellence since 1952.
They call that drone a Firebee, and it's been modified and re-engineered. I think now Northrop Grumman can fly it at 600 miles an hour, and it can pull a 9G turn
Thank you.
and not lose any altitude or speed.
So how is it recovered now?
Parachute or midair.
Still?
You know, in Vietnam,
Huh.
about halfway through Vietnam, they developed the midair retrieval system.
Yeah.
It's called Mars. And that enabled them to double their amount of drone missions each day by the midair retrieval. Because before that, it would just land in the ground or the sea, and sometimes that may be in highly defended areas where it's going to be a real pain to get it out. And the film was always flown overnight directly to I think Washington. All the drone film was flown there and processed. Over 100,000 linear feet of film in Vietnam from the Firebee drones.
And I got one little thing to add to the story. After the war, they had a mission out at Point Mugu, and that was 2 F-4s were assigned to shoot down a Firebee in the Pacific out at Point Mugu. So once the mission started, the F-4s could not shoot the Firebee down, and because of its ability to do a 7G turn, the Firebee ended up being the pursuer instead of the pursuee.
It was two Top Gun pilots. Yeah, there's a story in the book, and it's pretty thrilling to read.
Yeah.
Was this an autonomous Firebee, or was this being controlled?
I believe that one was being controlled from a ground station.
Yeah.
But one of them flamed out trying to keep up with the drone, and then the other one fired all its Sidewinder missiles at it and missed, and had to give up.
Yeah.
So I see on
Just outmaneuver them.
on the side of that, an LTV indication. Was
Uh,
LTV involved
No,
somehow?
Yeah.
Was
I
that
asked
just
that question.
happenstance?
no, I think that's just a number that was assigned to that
Okay.
aircraft.
Yeah. But there's also, it's hard to read, but it says Flying Circus 2, and there's the circus tent.
Uh,
After 5 successful missions, they would give the drone a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, we found some funny ones. I mean, some of the guys weren't too enthused with their commanding officer, and they would mix in a funny name on the drone with that guy's name.
Do you know when they became remotely pilotable?
In the 70s.
Yeah,
They either flew a program flight or they were remotely controlled from the C-130.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
even in Vietnam, they could be remotely
Yes.
piloted?
Yeah. There's a high altitude version of the 147, and it would fly at 75,000 feet, listening into radio communications.
yeah.
That
we
was
would-
controlled by the plane.
I'm sorry?
Where was the controller on the ones, early ones like that?
C-130.
On the
Oh, see, they
C-130?
were on the plane, that's what I'm saying. on
Yes,
the-
sir.
On the front runners, yeah.
Yeah, they could launch them and direct them a certain way, and then the program would take over, and it would fly its recon mission up the Hanoi Trail, and then out.
And they still didn't have cameras on them at that time, so they can visually.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, they were multitask. I mean, you could, these aircraft were designed in such a way that they could pull this panel off the bottom and put the panel on that had a camera in it. And they had the low altitude cameras, high altitude cameras. And, of course, the major achievement was jamming the SA-2 radars. That's what really
Yeah.
helped us, because the SA-2 had our number for shooting down our fighters. And so the development of Ryan aeronautical ability to jam the SA-2 radars eventually saved our pilots' lives and our aircraft as well.
Do you know what the effective range would be between the 130 and the unit it was
That I
controlling?
don't know. I don't know what
The
that is.
mission, it would fly for about 55 minutes, and it would cover 430 miles during its mission.
But we don't know how far it could stray from the 130 and still be controlled?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay,
It may have been, oh, you know what? 200 miles.
okay.
200 miles was the max on that. Yep.
So,
And was there do you know what model of 130 that is, or did it have a particular
Specially,
configuration that had a nickname or something on it?
specially modified, it was a DC-130, and it would, most of them would carry 2 drones, but they were able to carry 4 total. You know, because this was all, you know, they were making this technology stuff on the fly. They were developing it and field testing it right in the war.
yes.
So, you know, there were several times where a drone wouldn't deploy off the pylon, or it fell off the pylon on the runway,
Yeah.
or decided not to respond, and it would just fly out and not respond at all. They'd have to go shoot it down or let it run out of fuel
Yes.
and then retrieve it. I mean, it's, you know,
That's how pressing the need was for a low altitude, high speed aircraft that the SA-2 could not shoot down. I mean, we were in dire need of something like the
There's,
Firebee drone.
there's over 35 variants of the Firebee drone. The low altitude, I think, could fly as low as 400 feet at 600 miles an hour, taking pictures. You know, it was under the threshold for the SA-2s to launch, so they wouldn't even lock on or launch, and we were getting valuable pictures. And especially
Like
during
this
the
one.
Linebacker 2, the bomb damage assessment was not allowed to be done by the SR-71 or the U-2. It was done by the Firebee.
I wanted to ask more about the recovery, because I can see in my mind,
Yeah,
there's this thing
yeah.
hanging under a canopy, and then a chopper comes in and grabs it?
So
How does
it
do
had
that?
had its main parachute, and then it also had, I don't know the correct term for it, but another one, smaller one was up above it.
Little
And
It's
that-
called the drone.
And that the Sikorsky helicopter would catch that with a giant hook, and then it had a huge special hydraulic system on the plane to help reel up the drone closer to the helicopter. And then they fly it back to Da Nang, lower it down, get it ready, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Jeez.
One of the Firebee drones had 86 missions, didn't it? Or 68?
Yeah,
68?
yeah.
There's so much information. I mean, it's hard to just assimilate everything. that's associated with the drone missions. And we're still learning every day that we work out there at the museum. But we would invite you all to come and take a look anytime.
Do you have a card or
That was-
any handouts?
That was my next question. Would you tell us a little bit about how you decided to do a museum?
Yeah.
What's your
Thank you.
history and so
Absolutely.
forth? Because
Yeah.
I've learned a tremendous amount
Yeah.
about this, but nothing about a museum.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Well, in 2017, my grandfather was just ready to get started on the museum at 86 years old. He wanted to start that project. And you know, he was a lieutenant colonel, and he was a colonel. I worked for him. We rebuilt target drones as a business and resold them, and I worked for him as his assistant. And he was a bona fide colonel. And so at 86, he was ready to start the museum. He was 3 weeks into the project, and he was killed by a drunk driver on his way home from the museum.
Yeah.
So he didn't get to see it happen. So we've been working on it since then.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
We were just ready to have our grand opening, and then COVID hit.
Oh.
So, yeah, we were all geared up for that. COVID started, so that sidelined the opening, so it gave us another couple years to get it ready for the opening. But
And for Cattle Mills downtown, which direction are you from it?
we are, I guess we are just east of downtown off 66 at the Cattle Mills Airport.
Yeah, we're right on, we're the only buildings on the airport, so,
Yeah.
Thank you.
right off 1565.
You mentioned Point Magoo
Yeah.
Naval Air Missile Test Center in Oxnard, 1952 and 1953. I was the MP at the missile pad
At
at
Point
Point
Magoo,
Magoo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and did the reconnaissance on the beach prior to them taking off,
Wow.
putting in the
something else I want to say is, I want to thank all you veterans for your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome,
Susan?
well, thank you so much. I've learned more about drones than I ever knew.
I'm wrapping my arms around all this information.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. See, next month's program is going to be Charlotte Cook. She just published a new book, and so she's going to be telling us about her book. And we have coming up Muncie at the Museum. If you don't know what that is, it's like an outdoor scavenger hunt on your phone. On the September 24th and October 1st, we're having our Goofy Golf, so come out and play miniature golf on the museum grounds. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.